The transatlantic relationship with the whole of Europe has been shaken. The trust in American democracy, American partnership, American security support has been also severely shaken. So most Europeans now are beginning to rethink things. And of course, so is Ukraine.
Keir Starmer right now is maybe just somewhere over the North Atlantic on his way to Washington, D.C. for his talks with President Trump at the White House. President Zelensky of Ukraine was scheduled to be there on Friday for crucial talks. The White House official, though, has cast doubt on whether there's any point. The idea was to reach some sort of a deal and sign a contract on American mineral rights in Ukraine worth billions, maybe trillions. Zelensky, he wants some sort of security guarantee as part of that deal. So there is some sort of security for Ukraine against the Russian threat as it may develop after a possible ceasefire in the future. Well, now what? What on earth could be going on? What might be happening next? Let's talk to Sir Jeremy Greenstock, who's the UK former representative to the United Nations, who's now chairman of Gatehouse Advisory. Hello to you, Jeremy.
Good afternoon.
So, Jeremy, look, I mean, in your time, you've seen obviously a great deal of brinkmanship, but here now we see the Atlantic Alliance at stake. We see Western security and the involvement of America, or maybe the absence of America. These are things which are now actively possible. Haven't seen anything quite like this before.
No, this is extraordinary. The number of things that have happened in the last month since President Trump came into the White House is extraordinary. The transatlantic relationship with the whole of Europe has been shaken. The trust in American democracy, American partnership, American security support has been also severely shaken. So most Europeans now are beginning to rethink things. And of course, so is Ukraine.
Yeah, and when we see that there's a scheduled meeting between Volodymyr Zelensky and Donald Trump on Friday, now we'll see, but it now seems to be in severe doubt. The impression you get, Jeremy, is the White House were hoping to finally bounce him into putting his pen to paper on this mineral deal, while Zelensky was hoping to maybe just coax Donald Trump into offering security guarantees for Ukraine. None of those things certain. I mean, it is absolutely remarkable, isn't it? When you see the stakes on the table here, we're talking about the global balance of power. We're talking about the relationship as it was between the free world and Russia under Putin, and it's being played like a game of poker.
Yes, the way it's been done has got lots to comment on about it. I mean, it's not a done deal. We don't know the details of what Zelensky has agreed with the United States. He obviously held out against the US taking $500 billion out of Ukraine for this deal, and the Americans have conceded that. We don't know what the security arrangements alongside this deal are going to be. I imagine that the Ukrainians are going to have to stomach the continuing presence of the Russians on their soil in the east. Does that stop at the line they're at now, and will it be frozen for an indefinite period? Are the Russians going to be asking for the whole of the Donbass, that is another 10% or so of Ukrainian territory? Are there going to be any security arrangements to support Ukraine in this deal after it's done? Who will keep the peace? Who will keep the Russians out if this begins to go wrong in 1, 3 or 5 years' time? Lots of things we don't know. Lots of things, in my view, that Vladimir Zelensky will not want to concede. So we need to wait for the final text.
Yeah, look, when you see the United States voting with Russia at the United Nations, when you see Donald Trump presenting Ukraine with, frankly, extortionate terms for an economic partnership, even while Ukraine is fighting for its very survival, can it now be said, fairly certainly, that the world order that we've known is dead?
No, it's not dead. It's been shaken. And I use that picture intentionally. President Putin, and many Americans realize this, has not lost his contempt for the West, his wish to break up NATO and the Western-led global order. And there are going to be some Americans within the domestic system pushing back on that. So I don't think that President Trump has got a free run on this. Introducing President Putin back into the global community will only work for some people, certainly not for the Europeans at this current stage. So this has got some way to go because there's a lack of sense of reality in the American position as to what could happen down the road that hasn't yet been fed into the full calculations.
Yes.
And we'll need to see, I don't know whether Sir Keir Starmer will be able to get into this in a very frank way. We'll need to be able to get some sense of what the Brits have been able to say to the Americans on this. But the Prime Minister will not be happy with the way this looks.
No, I'm sure that's true. Well, you can only speculate, I guess, but what can Keir Starmer hope to do or achieve when he sits down with Donald Trump now? Because, look, there's no realistic chance, as far as we can see from where we're sitting, of any kind of agreement on a security guarantee for Ukraine, and still less, I imagine, on anything concrete when it comes to America's defense of Europe in the longer term. Maybe it'll be about inviting Donald Trump to take a ride in a royal carriage up the Mall, which seems a pretty limited reason for a visit. What good can Starmer hope to do now? What would he want to do if you were advising him?
Well, with somebody like President Trump, you've got to do two things. Make him feel comfortable with the conversation so that the conversation can continue. So a certain amount of certainly presentational aspects have got to be got right. And there've got to be some things that the British will bring to the American table, because special relationship or not, they always require that before they let you into their councils and into their inner courts.
Yes.
So we've had experience of that for generations. But also, one has got to stand up to the unrealities. One has got to stand up to the unrealities, to the pressure from somebody who hasn't calculated the full implications of what his decisions mean. And we'll need to see whether there is real backbone in the Starmer approach and in the rest of the European approach. I think President Macron got some way there, but never get all of the way there in one go. But we cannot just go along with whatever President Trump wishes to move on to. And we need to resist early if we're going to resist successfully at any stage.
Right. So if and when President Trump starts talking, as he did in front of Emmanuel Macron, about Europe not paying as much as America towards the defense of Ukraine, if he will not accept that it's Putin, not Zelensky, who is the dictator, then you say that Starmer's got to stand there next to him, look him in the eye and tell him that he's dead wrong, even if that means, well, a seriously tense moment.
Yes, it could be. You don't know that you're resisting until you have a tense moment. You've got to find where the borderlines are. But Europe, too, has got to face up to some realities. I remember I was leading conferences at the Ditchley Foundation 20 years ago on this subject and saying we've got to realize that the Americans are no longer a European power. They're a Western Hemisphere power with strong interests in Europe, but they're no longer a European power as they were through the Cold War and into the 90s. So the implications of that, the consequences of that, have now got to be faced up to by the Europeans. That means making sacrifices in our finances to put money into defence. Going up to 3% in Britain by 2030 is going to mean a huge set of choices elsewhere, but I believe it's the right thing to do. We cannot afford, as in the 1930s, to do it differently.
All right, Sir Jeremy Greenstock, former British ambassador to the UN, thank you so much for coming onto the programme.